The alien Baron stood tall on the grand stage of the Galactic Embassy. His silver robes sparkled under the lights, and his 4 golden horns curved proudly above his head. He was a powerful leader among his people, the Varnak Empire, rulers of many star systems. Beside him stood his daughter Sayla. She was small, quiet, and very still. She looked down at the floor, her long white hair covering her face. Her hands were folded in front of her, and she did not make a sound. "She is my daughter," the Baron said with a smirk, his voice loud and cold. "But she is mute, broken, and useless to me." He turned to the crowd of diplomats and warriors. Then his eyes settled on one man, a human. Captain Ron Hawley stood there, confused. He wore simple Earth military armor with a scratched helmet. Under his arm, he had just arrived for peace talks, but now all eyes were on him. "I give her to you, human," the Baron said, laughing. "Take her, raise her, use her as you wish." The room fell silent. No one spoke, not even the other Varnak warriors. It was a clear insult. Giving a mute daughter to a human was like tossing away trash. Captain Ron's jaw tightened. He didn't like games, and this felt like one. He looked at the girl. She didn't flinch, didn't look at him. She just stood there like a statue. "Why?" Ron asked finally. The Baron shrugged. "Because humans think they are kind. So show your kindness, show your mercy." Then he turned and walked away, not even looking back at his daughter. Ron looked around. No one moved to stop this. Sayla was now his responsibility. He sighed and walked over to her. She still didn't look up. "Come with me," he said softly. To his surprise, she obeyed, silently following him out of the hall, back on Ron's ship, the Silver Flame. The crew was surprised. Some whispered, some stared, but Ron shut it down quickly. "She's under my care," he said firmly. "No one touches her. No one mocks her." He gave her a quiet room and brought her food. She ate without a word, her movements calm and slow. Ron tried talking to her, asking questions, telling jokes, even showing her Earth music. But she never replied, never smiled. Still, he noticed strange things. She was always watching, her eyes sharp and alert. She followed his hand movements, understood his orders. Once, she picked up a repair tool and handed it to him, before he even asked. She's not dumb, Ron thought. Just quiet. That night, something strange happened. Ron was asleep in his quarters when he woke up suddenly. He thought he heard something. A sound, soft like a whisper. He sat up and listened. Again, a whisper, broken, almost like someone struggling to speak. He grabbed his light and walked toward the hallway. Then he froze. Sayla was standing just outside his door. Her eyes were wide, and her lips were moving barely. No sound came out this time, but it was clear she was trying. Ron stepped closer. "Sayla," he whispered. She looked up at him for the first time. For a moment, everything stopped. Her silver eyes were full of something he didn't expect: pain, hope, and maybe trust. And then a single tear rolled down her cheek. Ron felt something shift inside him. This girl wasn't useless. She wasn't broken. She was hiding something, something deep and powerful. Over the next few days, Ron treated her like a crew member. He taught her small words with hand signs and pictures. She learned fast, faster than anyone he had ever seen. She still didn't speak, but she could now answer yes or no. She even laughed once, quietly, when Ron dropped a tool on his foot. But then, something strange happened again. She walked into the engine room and touched a control panel. Suddenly, the screen blinked, and lines of alien code appeared fast and glowing. Ron rushed over. "What did you do?" Sayla stepped back, scared. But the code remained. It wasn't human. And it wasn't Varnak either. It was something older, something forgotten. Ron sent a message to his tech officer. When the officer saw the code, he turned pale. This is military encryption," he said. "But it's not ours. And not theirs either. It's something hidden." Ron looked at Sayla again. Who was this girl? Why did the Baron give her away so easily? What was she hiding inside her silence? He didn't know yet, but he was sure of one thing. This was no ordinary girl, and this was no ordinary gift. It was the start of something much bigger. The ship was quiet, but Ron couldn't sleep. There was something about the girl Sayla that kept his thoughts restless. She hadn't spoken, hadn't made a sound since the moment she stepped onto his ship, but she watched everything. Like she was reading the air. That night he heard something, soft, like wind brushing against metal, a broken sound, just for a second. He sat up in bed and listened. Nothing. He walked out into the hallway, blaster at his side just in case, but there was no danger waiting. Just her. She stood in the corridor, barefoot, her eyes glowing faintly under the emergency lights. Her lips were moving slowly, like they were trying to remember something they once knew. No sound came out now, but Ron could see the effort. He didn't speak, just watched. After a few seconds, she looked at him and stopped. The glow in her eyes faded, and then, just like that, she turned and walked back to her room. Ron didn't move for a long time. He had seen soldiers break under pressure, seen machines fall apart, but this was different. This was someone trying to wake up from a long silence. The next day, Sayla was sitting in the engine bay, watching the crew work. She didn't speak, didn't touch anything, but the moment one of the engineers reached for the wrong wire, she stood and pointed. No one noticed except Ron. She knew something. Later, he left a small tablet in her room, filled with simple images. Yes, no danger, safe. Within hours, she had rearranged them, made her own signs. She wasn't just learning. She was remembering. Then something happened that changed everything. She entered the control room and stood near a locked panel, one that hadn't worked in years. Before anyone could stop her, she placed her hand on it. The lights blinked, then turned blue. The screen came to life, showing strange alien symbols spinning in a circle. The crew froze. No one had touched that console in over a decade. They didn't even know what it was for. Jenna ran diagnostics, but nothing made sense. Some of this code is ancient, she said. This isn't just Varnak language, it's older. Ron watched as Sayla traced a symbol with her finger. It looked like a spiral, sharp and smooth. The lights on the ship flickered again. Not from damage, but from connection. He approached her slowly. You know what this is? He asked. She didn't answer, just tapped the screen again. This time, it flashed bright gold and shut off. The power dropped for 2 seconds, then returned. The systems were fine. But something had changed. Ron could feel it, like the ship had taken a breath. He had a meeting with Jenna that night. They went over the data, every log, every pulse of power. This panel isn't just a tool, she said. It's a gate, a control system for something old, something buried inside. This ship. Ron looked at the screen. The last line of code written in Varnak read, "Command accepted, voice incomplete." Voice, Ron repeated. She didn't say anything. Maybe she didn't need to. Jenna said, and then the fear began. 3 days later, a drone appeared near the outer edge of their patrol route. It didn't attack. It didn't respond. It just recorded, then left. When Ron traced its design, the mark was clear: Varnak Elite. More importantly, it carried the Baron's personal crest. He knew. The Baron knew Sayla was waking up. Ron tightened security, locked the ship down. But inside he knew locks wouldn't stop what was coming. He had taken in a girl who said nothing, but now she was beginning to speak without words, and others could feel it, even from light years away. Late that night, he passed her room and paused. She was sitting by the window, watching the stars. Her fingers moved slowly in the air, like she was writing invisible letters only she could see. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because somewhere deep inside her silence, something ancient had started to rise. Ron kept watching her from the corner of his eye. Sayla had changed in only a few days. She still didn't speak, but now she moved with more purpose. She explored the ship like someone searching for something, not someone lost. One morning, she walked into the control room and sat at the far console. Ron didn't stop her. He just watched. Then, with her delicate fingers, she tapped a few buttons. The screen lit up again. flooding with glowing alien symbols. It wasn't random. It was like she knew what she was doing. Ron recorded the screen and took it to Tech Officer Jenna. When Jenna saw the file, her face turned pale. "This isn't normal code," she said slowly. "This is locked military data." Ron frowned. "Ours?" "No," she whispered. "This is from the Varnak Empire's high-level channel stuff that's hidden even from their generals." She leaned closer to the screen, reading the symbols. "Some of this looks older." "Pre-Empire," Ron stared at the screen, then looked back at the door. He had a quiet feeling crawling through his bones now. Sayla wasn't just a quiet girl with a sad past. She knew things, secret things, and that made her dangerous. That night, Ron locked his cabin door for the first time since joining the ship. He wasn't afraid of her, no, but he knew the galaxy wasn't kind to people who carried secrets. Someone would come for her. It was only a matter of time, he was right. 2 nights later, the alarm screamed across the ship. Ron jumped out of bed and ran toward the weapons bay. The security lights were flashing red. His cum buzzed. "Captain, we've been breached." Unknown cloaked ship just attached to the hull. He grabbed his blaster and sprinted toward Sayla's room. She was already awake, standing in the center of her room. Her silver eyes were glowing, calm, unafraid. She looked at Ron like she was waiting for something. Blaster fire echoed in the hallway. Ron pushed her behind him. But before he could act, the metal wall next to them tore open. 3 masked figures stepped through the smoke. Weapons ready, Ron raised his gun, but he was too slow. One assassin pointed a blade at him. The other 2 stepped toward Sayla. Then everything stopped. Sayla lifted her hand, just one small hand. Her fingers curled into a strange shape, and her mouth opened. A single sound came out low and soft, like wind in a tunnel, but it hit the air like a storm. The assassins froze, their bodies stiff like statues. Their weapons dropped, clattering on the floor. They didn't move, didn't speak. They were trapped, held in place by something unseen. Ron stared in shock. He had never seen anything like this. Sayla stepped forward slowly, her voice growing louder but still gentle. The air shimmered around her lips as she spoke again. The lights flickered, and the ship groaned like it was alive. Then the assassins collapsed. Unconscious, not dead, Ron lowered his weapon slowly, heart pounding. He looked at Sayla, but this time he didn't see a quiet girl. He saw something ancient, something powerful. She turned to him and tilted her head, as if asking, "Do you understand now?" He didn't. Not fully, but he nodded anyway. Later, Jenna scanned the unconscious attackers. Their armor was marked with a royal symbol. Not just any mark, it was the personal crest of the Baron himself. Ron stared at the screen, jaw tight. "The Baron sent them," he said. "He gave her to me, and now he wants her dead." Jenna didn't answer. She was too busy staring at the ship logs. The section where Sayla had spoken was now full of strange data spikes. Some of it matched lost Varnak tech records, long-dead systems coming back online. "Her voice," Jenna whispered. It triggered something in the ship, something old. Ron sat down slowly, eyes on the wall. The pieces were falling together. The Baron hadn't given her away as a joke. He had thrown her far away out of fear. Sayla wasn't just mute. She was holding something inside her, something locked, ancient, and dangerous. And now, she had begun to unlock it. Ron looked at her again that night. She sat in the engine room, humming softly to herself, still silent, but no longer hiding. The storm had only just begun, and Sayla was the eye of it. Asterisk, the lights on the ship flickered again, but this time, it wasn't because of damage. It happened every time she spoke, even if it was just a single word. Sayla sat cross-legged in the center of the control deck, eyes closed. Her hands rested on her knees, her lips slightly open. Ron stood nearby, still watching, still unsure if he should feel afraid or amazed. He had seen her freeze trained assassins with only her voice. He had seen her unlock military code no one else could even read. But this was something else, she whispered again. The same word from the night before. The walls hummed, and the air around her shimmered like heat over fire. The ship's AI came online without being called. Command accepted, it said. Voice print matched. Ron stepped forward. Matched to what? Matched to Royal Genetic Line, designation, speaker. The room went quiet. Even the humming stopped. Ron stared at Sayla. She didn't open her eyes, but a small tear rolled down her cheek. She had heard it too, the word speaker meant something to her, something heavy. He later checked the archives. Digging through every scrap of data the ship had, it was buried deep, marked as myth. The Varnek people once believed in speakers, beings who could connect to lost alien tech using only their voice. Not machines, not implants, just voice and blood. But the speakers were hunted, destroyed, made extinct long ago. They were too powerful, too dangerous. Their words could control ships, crack code, even break the minds of weaker beings. And now one stood on his ship, quiet and calm, hiding for years in silence. Sayla wasn't just rare, she was impossible. And the Baron knew. That's why he gave her away. He didn't want her to be found, he wanted her gone. Ron kept her close after that. He started teaching her about Earth, about choices, about freedom. She listened, eyes wide, soaking up every lesson like she was building something inside herself. She still didn't speak often, but when she did, things happened. The lights dimmed, doors unlocked, engines warmed without touch. The crew was divided. Some were afraid, others in awe. Ron didn't blame them. He still couldn't believe it himself. One day, Sayla walked into the engine bay and placed her palm on the floor. She whispered again, a new word this time. The metal shifted under her hand and opened, revealing a hidden chamber no one knew existed. Inside was a black sphere, floating gently. The ship's sensors went crazy, detecting no known energy, no material match. Sayla stared at it like it was a memory. Then she looked back at Ron and finally spoke 3 words, clear and strong. This is mine. Her voice was steady, without fear, and for the first time, Ron heard not just sound, he felt it. Like a wave through his bones, the sphere reacted. Glowing slowly, like it recognized her, data filled the air in bright floating symbols. Jenna, who had followed behind, whispered in awe, "It's alive." That same night, Ron received a secret transmission. It came coded in old Varnak encryption. Only one sentence appeared on the screen. Return the girl, or Earth burns. Ron closed the message. Jaw clenched. The Baron was done hiding. He had waited, watched, and now he wanted her back or dead. But Ron wasn't giving her up. He had seen who she really was. Not a weapon, not a freak, not a broken girl. She was something the galaxy hadn't seen in thousands of years. A voice that could bend stars. And she was just beginning to speak that night. As the stars moved quietly outside the window, Sayla stood at the edge of the deck, the black sphere. Floating beside her, she looked peaceful, but inside her, something ancient had awakened. Ron stood beside her, blaster at his side. "You ready?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes shining with power and something else, determination. Then, for the second time that day, she spoke. Let him come. The ship hovered in silence above the blue surface of Earth. But inside, nothing felt peaceful. Ron stood at the command deck, eyes locked on the sky. Something was coming. He could feel it in his chest. Sayla sat in the center of the room, the black sphere floating behind her like a quiet shadow. She wasn't afraid, not even now. Ever since she touched the sphere, she had changed again. She moved with more purpose. More power. Even her silence felt loud. Jenna walked in holding a tablet, her hands shaking. "It's confirmed," she said quietly. A fleet just jumped from Varnek space, 20 ships at least. Ron didn't look away from the stars. "They're not here to talk." "No," Jenna whispered. "They're not." Sayla stood and walked to the window. The stars above Earth began to shift, blinking one by one as dark shapes appeared in orbit. The Baron had arrived. He didn't send a message this time. He sent a wall of warships. But Sayla wasn't looking at the ships. She was looking down at Earth. Her hands rested on the glass. Her breath slow, calm, beautiful, she said softly. Her third spoken word. Ron stepped beside her. "This is what he wants to destroy," he said. "Our home." Sayla nodded. Then she walked back to the center of the ship and whispered a phrase Ron had never heard before. The lights dimmed, and the black sphere glowed deep red. The voice of the ship's AI spoke again. "First Empire systems online," Ron blinked. "First Empire?" He remembered reading about it, a forgotten civilization that ruled before the Varnak ever rose. A myth, now very real. The ship shook gently as new systems came alive, panels sliding open. Weapons unlocking. Engines that had never been touched by human hands began to warm. The silver flame was no longer just a ship. It had become something else. Ron gathered the crew. Every one of them stood in silence, looking at Sayla. None of them saw her as a girl anymore. She was the reason they still had hope. He stepped forward. Armor strapped to his chest. "If anyone wants to leave, say it now." No one moved. Not one voice spoke. He turned to her. "What's the plan?" She raised one hand, the sphere floating beside her. "I speak," she said. "They listen." Ron nodded slowly. They didn't need more weapons. They had her. As the fleet above them prepared to fire, Sayla walked to the ship's core. She placed both hands on the glowing console and closed her eyes. A low hum filled the air. Then her voice rose clear, smooth, powerful. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. One word passed through every system. One word slipped into every Varnak ship. A word from the old tongue forgotten by all but her. It didn't just reach their ears. It entered their minds, their bones, and in that moment, everything stopped. Weapons powered down, lights dimmed, and even space felt still. On the Baron's ship, alarms screamed in confusion. Crew members grabbed their heads, unable to think. He stood at the center of his throne room, staring at the Pa. "Silent stars, what is this?" He shouted, but no one answered. His screen blinked, and Sayla's face appeared. Her silver eyes locked with his. She didn't speak yet. She just looked, calm, steady, no longer afraid of him. Then finally she spoke. "You tried to bury me," she said, "but I was never yours to control." The Baron stepped back, hands shaking. "No," he muttered. "No. This isn't possible." But it was below. Ron watched the enemy fleet slowly begin to drift apart. Some ships turned and vanished into warp. Others shut down completely. Crews overwhelmed by what they felt. One by one, the circle of ships began to break, and in the silence, Sayla opened her eyes. The storm was over. But the war was just beginning. Not a war of guns, a war of voices, of minds, of truth. And she would be the one to lead it. The Baron sat in silence inside his massive throne chamber. His fleet had not fired. His warriors had not attacked. They had stopped because of one voice. A girl's voice. He stared at the dark screen in front of him, hands shaking. His daughter's face still burned in his mind, calm, unblinking, and full of something he couldn't destroy. Power. He slammed his fist on the console. "She's just a child." He growled, but the silence around him didn't agree. Not anymore. Far below, aboard the ancient ship floating over Earth, Sayla sat alone. She had spoken to a fleet and made it pause, but the Baron was still there. And she knew he wouldn't stay quiet for long. Ron entered quietly, standing near the edge of the room. "She didn't break them," he said. "She woke them up." Sayla looked over at him, her voice soft. "They've lived too long under fear. They only needed to hear something true." Ron nodded. He watched as she placed her hand on the sphere again. It pulsed with light, brighter than ever before. But this time, something changed. The ship's walls opened, revealing chambers no one had ever seen. Inside were machines shaped like bones. Covered in ancient symbols, Ron looked around, speechless. Weapons, shields, systems beyond human understanding, all waiting for her command. Then a voice filled the ship, not Sayla's, but the Baron's. He had broken through the signal block and was broadcasting to every human channel. "This is your last warning," he said. "Turn over the speaker." or Earth becomes ash. Jenna's hands flew across the console, trying to jam the signal, but it was too strong. The Baron wasn't hiding now. He wanted the galaxy to hear his threat. Ron looked at Sayla. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, stood in front of the main screen, and raised her hand. The black sphere floated beside her again, glowing like a small sun. She spoke once, her voice steady. "This is not your galaxy anymore." The signal cracked, screens flickered, and the Baron's image shook on the other side. The Baron grabbed his head as a wave of pressure hit him. Sayla wasn't just talking to his ship, she was talking to him. Directly, through every system, every wire, every screen. "You left me in silence," she said. "You feared my voice, so you buried it." Her voice echoed through his throne room like thunder. His guards fell to their knees, unable to stand. And the Baron, the proud ruler of dozens of worlds, screamed. Ron watched it all in silence. He didn't cheer, didn't smile. He knew this wasn't victory yet. It was justice, but it wasn't over. The Baron's ship began to drift, lights failing, systems breaking, one by one. The smaller ships around him shut down their weapons. They didn't run this time, they simply powered down and waited. And then, Sayla stopped speaking. The ship grew quiet again. Ron stepped closer. "Are you okay?" Sayla looked tired, but she nodded. "I didn't break him," she said. "I showed him what he made." Ron glanced at the screen. The Baron was no longer standing. He was curled on the floor, whispering to himself. Not dead, but defeated. Jenna walked in slowly, still in shock. "That wasn't a voice," she whispered. "That was a weapon." Ron looked at Sayla again. "No," he said. "That was a warning." Outside the ship, stars blinked quietly. The fleet above Earth floated in place, unsure, leaderless, and Sayla, once silent and forgotten, had become the voice they all now feared. But more than that, the voice they couldn't ignore anymore. She turned and walked away, not because she was running, but because she had already won something more important than a battle. She had taken back the part of herself they tried to erase. And now, the galaxy had heard her, clearly, completely, for the first time in generations. The stars above Earth were still. The Varnak fleet no longer moved. No weapons fired, no threats remained, only silence. But this silence wasn't fear. It was something else. Respect. On the command deck of the old ship, Sayla stood alone. Her long hair moved gently in the quiet wind of the ventilation. The black sphere floated beside her, dim now, like it was resting. She didn't speak, not yet. She didn't need to. The Baron's voice had vanished. His ships had shut down. His threats had turned to whispers. He was no longer feared, no longer obeyed. He had fallen, not by war, not by death, but by truth. Ron entered slowly, his boots soft on the floor. He stopped behind her, watching her look at the Earth below. "They're waiting," he said. She nodded. She had known it all along. After all the running, the silence, the fear, this moment was always coming. Across the galaxy, screens lit up. Not with violence, not with orders, but with her face. She didn't speak right away. She stood there, letting them see her, not just as a girl, not as a speaker, but as someone real. Someone they had ignored, then hunted, then feared, then she began. Her voice didn't shout. It was calm, smooth, steady. Each word fell like stone. And the galaxy listened. She didn't talk about revenge. She didn't demand surrender. She spoke about choice, about truth, about how silence was forced on her, not by nature, but by fear. She told them that power was never the voice. Power was what you chose to say when you had one. Planets that had been loyal to the Baron cut their ties in the days that followed. Some offered peace, some asked for help, and Sayla, the girl who once said nothing, answered every call, not as a ruler, not as a god, but as a guide. The Earth Council offered her protection, a place to stay, even a home. She accepted quietly, but never stayed in one place for long. She walked among people, not above them. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, even the sky seemed to lean closer. Ron remained at her side, not as her protector, not anymore, but as a friend. He had watched her grow, rise, and speak when no one believed she could. Now, he watched her lead not through fear, but through voice, a voice that didn't destroy. It built. One night, as they stood on a cliff under Earth's moon, Ron turned to her. "You ever think about what he took from you?" he asked. She looked up at the stars, her eyes soft. "He took my voice," she said, "but I made a better one." And Ron knew she didn't mean louder. She meant stronger, sharper, true. The girl who had once been given away like trash had become a force the galaxy could no longer silence, not with chains, not with threats, not even with memory, because now her voice lived in more than just her. It lived in the people who had once been afraid to speak, in those who listened and those who finally heard, and in every corner of space, from the smallest ship to the highest throne. They spoke of her not as the mute daughter, not as the barren shame, but as the girl who spoke and changed everything, forever.